Do you manage a multi-generational salon team or maybe work as part of one? You're not alone, and we know that it can be super frustrating at times, whichever side of the coin that you're on. In today's episode of the Salon Scoop, I sit down with a Gen X salon owner who spent the last few years figuring out how to lead and, more importantly, how to learn from Gen Z employees. From communication challenges to fresh perspectives, we're going to break down what it really takes to build a thriving cross-generational team in your salon company. So whether you're a veteran in the business or just starting out, this one's packed with real talk and valuable insights for everyone. Welcome to the Salon Scoop, a podcast by Salon S.O.S. I'm your host, Scott Moon, the founder of Salon S.O.S., and I'm obsessed with helping salon professionals live their best life. In this show, we shop talk all things salon to bring you real-life stories, debates, entertainment, and inspiration to help you find happiness and success in this beautiful industry. If you work in the salon industry in any capacity, this podcast is open to you. So set down your scissors or rinse out that toner and let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of the Salon Scoop, everyone. As always, I'm your host, Scott Moon. Today, we're going to get the scoop on the generational challenges in our industry. So maybe you're an older salon professional who's ever said they just don't work the same way that we used to, right? Or maybe you're a younger professional, right? And you've caught yourself saying, these old timers don't understand me. They're just stuck in the past. Whichever side of the fence you're on, we're going to delve deep into this topic today. Salon owners have been struggling to find and attract, right, and younger staff and retain them. And if you don't adapt as an older salon owner, you risk either losing top talent or, worse still, becoming completely disconnected from the future of your own business. Young service providers, on the other hand, they want to be successful too, right? But they often feel misunderstood or underestimated. This episode will show you that good salon owners want to understand you and can help you achieve lasting success in this industry. You don't have to go out and figure everything out on your own the hard way. To help me navigate these generational gaps, I have the pleasure of welcoming an individual with a wealth of experience and expertise in our industry. He's not only a salon owner, but he's been a salon business coach, an industry leadership speaker, and a senior director with the Summit Salon Business Center. I have a huge amount of respect for this man, and I'm happy to reconnect today. Tim Fisk, thank you, buddy, for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. It's great to see you too. I feel like it's been a couple of years, and yeah, it's great to be back. I'm psyched to have this conversation.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I've been wanting to have this conversation for a long time. I should also throw in Tim is a phenomenal singer. For those that have the opportunity to be to be with him. But we're going to focus on the meat and potatoes of generational issues today, which sometimes come into play when we talk about music, also, right?
Yes, but I'm not going to sing today.
The battle of what playlists are going to go on in the salon.
Yeah.
Tim, for the benefit of our audience, can you tell us a little bit about your salon ownership journey? It's kind of like how you got into it, how long you've been an owner, and maybe give us a quick overview of your team and the ages, the generations that you deal with.
Yeah, so my salon company is Salon Scoop. We're located in Northampton, Massachusetts, which is kind of the Pioneer Valley, kind of college town, USA in Western Massachusetts. Scoop started in 2003. I was actually there. I was a consultant at the time, working with them. My expertise was in QuickBooks. And I stayed with them for a few years, then left and did some other things. And I came back in 2014. I was kind of doing a little bit of a life change at that time. I just turned 40, actually. And I said, hey, do you guys want to play? I'm really great with marketing now. And of course, my finance background. And they said, yes, we would love to work with you. You have to go to the summit. And so they sent me down to the Summit in New York City, where I attended their 3.5 day at the time seminar and met Heather Bagby and Dave Kirby, who I now work with. And everything kind of went from there. And I started working with them. By 2018, I purchased the company outright. And so I've owned it since then. And then, of course, 2 years and boom, pandemic. And then boom, Gen Z. Really, actually, it all kind of happened at the same time.
Yes.
So yeah, I've owned the salon now for 7 years. We're in our 22nd year in business, and yeah, it's amazing journey.
Yeah, and just tell us how big is the team and what are the sort of the age ranges that you're working with currently?
Yeah, so we're 16 strong stylists. Actually, 13 stylists and then three guest service experts. So, and funny, we have 13 stylists and six chairs. So it can be done.
Woo.
And we're open 7 days a week. I would say half the team is Gen Z. And that's been the case now for a few years. Um, the rest of them are millennial, really. I'm grandpa at 50 years old. So like there's nobody, I have one stylist who is in my generation. And then other than that, everybody else is under the age of 36, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's a pretty common occurrence in our industry. So let's delve in. I mean, you've seen a few generations, therefore, obviously, come through your salon. And what was let's say, your first impression when Gen Z employees started joining the workforce in your salon company, at least?
I think it's important actually to kind of put it into context, and I'm sure everybody's had this experience. It was 2020, really. It was the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So we met the Gen Zs wearing masks, basically, right?
Yeah.
And they were just coming out of school. We at that time were even recruiting from some of the technical high schools. So I had some young people that were in my salon at that time, real young, had just like finished the last year of their school wearing a mask. So it was very different, I
Yeah.
think, and we were just so ready to pivot and come back and so eager and excited to meet these young people. Um, and I, of course, noticed right away that there was a lot that was different about them, things that really didn't have anything to do with the pandemic, just about them in general. And a lot of it was their hunger. They really wanted this and they were really excited about their careers. And, as we have this conversation, I'm just probably going to keep coming back to that because that's the one thing that I've noticed the most about them.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. How do you, I mean, that might be one way I want to know is how do you find Gen Z, how do you find that they differ from, let's say, millennials or, Gen X, staff in terms of motivation, in terms of communication, maybe like overall attitude towards working?
It is very different, I think, but especially from millennials. Millennials, I feel like when we started working with the millennials, they kind of showed us as a Gen Xer, I feel like I'm just like work, 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 right? That's what I was taught. That's what I learned. I've always had a couple of jobs. I started working when I was like 14 years old and I never really stopped.
Yeah.
The millennials came in and of course they showed us kind of how to chill out and find a little bit of balance, maybe like pay attention to our life and enjoy some of it. And I really appreciate that. And I've learned from that. Um, but when the Gen Zs came in, they were just ready to rock and roll. They're the ones asking for what is their path? What is their next step? What is it going to look like? Just from interviewing them, I found this. They're very inquisitive. They want to know what's what. And I think that probably has a lot to do with the fact that they grew up with phones in their hands. They're used to having all the information and they want to get that from us as leaders in these salons. And we have to be prepared to meet them where they want to be.
Totally makes sense. What would you say is one common misconception that maybe you had, or that at least you see, you know, other salon owners having about Gen Z typically?
You know, one of the things that shocked me the most, and I'm going to try to say this, well, whatever. I was so shocked that they just wanted to work 3 days a week. That like really shocked me. But and I hear, Gen X owners and even boomer owners say, these kids, they don't want to work. And I actually don't find that to be true. When they're in the salon, they want to work really hard and they just have other things going on in their life. I feel like this is the generation of gigs and gigging and like even monetizing hobbies and all the things that they do. So for me, I'm like, what do you do with the other 4 days in a week if you're only working 3 days a week? I would probably go crazy. I was shocked that this is what they wanted to do. And of course, I heard from them sometimes like, it's just too hard on my body. And like my 50-year-old self that like wakes up every morning with a new thing hurting was like, oh, okay. You're 22 years old. But, I respect that. And now what I've learned from kind of once I accepted all of that, and probably why I'm able to have 13 stylists in my salon with 6 chairs, is that I'm just filling up the shifts and they're here to work and they really bang it out. And I'm shocked at how much they're actually able to earn in my company in those 3 days.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, the I'd say the productivity level is can be off the charts, right? Because they're used to multitasking, they're used to having their phones doing things all the time. And you're right, they're they're doing a gazillion things in their life. It just doesn't always revolve around, being at the salon. Um, and that wasn't available to, our generation back in the day. We didn't have those options even available to us. So
No.
it's not part of our scope really to even, think about that. Whereas this generation, that's how they've grown up, right? They've grown up watching YouTubers, watching Instagrammers, TikTokers, and that's part of who they are, and they're social, very social as well, just in a different way than we used to be, right?
100%. And honestly, I've learned that from them. And we talk about flexibility a lot when we talk about the Gen Zs.
Yeah.
I will say that over the course of the last 4 years, those Gen Zs that started out at 3 days, they've come to me and said, I want to work 4 days now. They have something that they want. They want to get something and they're willing to put in the work for it. But then they'll do that for a year and a half, and then they might come back and say, okay, I'm ready to go back to 3 days now. And that's what I learned about with flexibility with them. They just have things going on and I just want to meet them where they're at. And as a salon owner, think, if I'm really going to be a place where stylists can come and thrive, then having that flexibility is something that I think I learned from Gen Z.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I was actually going to get into learning, like what's been the biggest, let's say, learning curve for you as a salon owner when it comes to hiring and managing Gen Z employees and integrating them within your team? What's been that learning curve like for you?
We've always been a coaching salon, so we do a lot of that. What I've learned from Gen Z is they are eager. They want that coaching. They need a plan. So I have to show up prepared, right? There's no winging it with Gen Z. Um, and if you say that you're going to do something, you better well do it because they're going to hold you to it. I will use this metaphor when I'm talking to other salon owners. Actually, it's not a metaphor. I say, like, in my salon company, it's my Gen Z staff that are harassing me a week out before the beginning of the next month saying, where are the promotional assets for our next set of promotions? Like, I- I'm used to like getting them out late because we're all busy and we don't have time. These guys are so on it that you have to be on your toes with them. And that's, I think, the biggest shift for me is just that. And also, I would say, including them in more of the operations of the business. So, in the case of those promos, for example, I no longer tell them what it's going to be. We talk about what they're going to be. And I find when I do that with them, that little bit of their seat at the table really engages them and makes them take ownership over the initiatives that we're doing in the salon, whatever it is. If it's bringing in a salon scale or changing our salon software, the more that I involve them, the more I think that they bring to the table and the more invested they are in the company.
Love that. Have you had to change your hiring either philosophy, your hiring strategy, your hiring process in any way to accommodate this new generation?
Yeah, hiring and firing, actually. I would say it's more digital. We start now every process with a Zoom interview. They've, I think that they're comfortable doing that right out the gate. And it's a way to get quickly into their mind and their schedule and let them know that we're ready. And then what we do after that is they come in for a shadow day and we pay them for that day. So that's something that we started doing, I would say, before the pandemic, but now it's just a must. It's something that we have to do. And we realize that they're interviewing us as much as we're interviewing them during that process.
Yeah, I think that's really important to recognize. Just reiterate what you just said. They are interviewing you as a salon and the salon owner as much as you are interviewing them. So make sure to keep that in mind. Tim, let's jump to a little lighter side here. Have you ever had a complete like facepalm moment with a Gen Z staff member where you're just like, I cannot believe what I just heard or what I just saw? Or if so, give us a little bit of an insight. What happened? How did you handle it?
Sure. Um, you're probably not even going to believe this story. It's just too much. One thing about Gen Zs, and I think millennials probably started this trend, was taking their birthday off. Like they needed to have their
Right.
birthday off.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, what? Because like we never did that. But I'm totally fine with it now. Of course, I want them to have that day off. But it's really just like the cavalier attitude about taking time off altogether. So I had this one stylist, not going to mention their name, and they literally called out because a tarot card that they pulled that morning told them they shouldn't come into work.
Ooh.
Swear to God. And that talk about facepalm, I was like, dead. I couldn't even believe it. And what killed me though about it is our protocol is that they call the front desk. And so of course everybody in the salon knew that this is what happened. And I was just like, really? I couldn't. I mean, it's a great story after the fact, and that person
Yeah.
doesn't work for me anymore, just to suffice it to say.
Tarot cards are now banned. Uh,
I can't believe it.
oh goodness. Thanks for sharing that. All right. How do you find that your younger employees respond to some of the more traditional salon practices, like the commission structures, maybe dress code, punctuality, things of that nature? How are they responding and how are you dealing with that?
Yeah, it's a great question. When it comes to the commission model for us, like we're very transparent about it, and we do a lot of mentoring around how much money they're going to make. Of course, at Summit Salons, that earning potential that we show them really focuses on how much money they're going to make more so than what the commission is. But we're super transparent with it, and we start every one of our monthly meetings talking about how much money they're going to make, how much money they're making, if they're on track with their goals, and they find a lot of value in that. So I think they're embracing a commission-based career path for us. We haven't had a lot of people exiting to go into suites or into rental situations. That's not to say that during the pandemic, I didn't lose some people to suites. I certainly have. And I have had people leave to go to suites, but for the most part, people are really into our commission and compensation structure as long as they know exactly where it's headed. As far as dress code, we don't have one. And so that's like a big one and I don't think we've ever really had one. But you know, the truth of the matter is if you're going to go that route and not have one, you better be ready to have conversations when things aren't going the way that you want them to, right?
Yeah.
You can't just lean into a policy or an employee manual. It's not how you build culture. And I have had to have some of those conversations, and there were tears, of course. But if I promise to give them everything that I have to help them grow and become a successful stylist in this industry, then that means having honest conversations, sometimes even about, how you show up to work.
Yeah. Do you have any issues with punctuality with the Gen Zs versus millennials?
Nope, not at all. In fact, um, the Gen Zs are all coming in early and eager to help. They just get involved with so many things. And I find that they're right on track with everything. The other thing, too, that they do that I think is really cool, we always wanted to put energy into celebrating everybody's birthday, celebrating people's anniversaries. Ever since the pandemic, like my entire team, they're on that. Like they're on it. So everybody gets a card, everybody gets a little cake or cupcakes or something. They're just super aware of celebrating each other. And I think that's incredible.
Nice. Well, we both know how important culture is to have a thriving salon company and actually growing business. You talked a lot about how you've been able to have a pretty strong retention of staff over the years. That's got to be, challenging. And I know a lot of salon owners out there complain that it's difficult for them to kind of communicate and relate, let's say, with this younger generation. So what do you find is working well within your salon and also just salons that you know of in general, to help build stronger relationships and better connect, right, with those Gen Z employees?
I think that our stylists want a seat at the table. And I always say, like, they should have a voice, but not necessarily a vote, right? Because there's a difference, Scott, between um, wanting to bring your team to the table because you're afraid to make hard decisions and you want to be liked, with you want to bring them to the table because you're genuinely curious and you think that they might have something to offer. In fact, know that they will have something to offer. And I feel like in my company, as I shifted to that, right? And we were all white knuckled during the pandemic, and I didn't know what to do half the time. But as I've shifted into like bringing them in to a lot of the things, and it could be anything from, what are we going to serve at the coffee bar to, who wants to take over inventory management, or I have people working on just the window decor, giving them all kinds of different opportunities to engage with the business besides just coming in, doing hair, working behind the chair, and then going. I think that has created like a really strong culture. And the more I lean into that, the more I get back. It's really like been a one for one for me.
Hmm, nice. And are you finding any expectation for those extra activities that they want some extra somehow compensation to go along with that? How are you what are you receiving from them in terms of that request, if you are, and how are you managing it?
Yes. And I think the answer is yes. And we do want to do that. And it's not for everything. Like if somebody's going to decorate the window for a holiday, I'm not going to pay them to do that. Right. They're doing that like while they're on shift and so in fact, I am paying them to do it. It's not like they're coming in and doing it extra. Right. They're on the
Right.
clock, they're in the company.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like other jobs like inventory management, or I have some folks working on our marketing. So helping out with some of the marketing duties. I do pay them. It's not modest, actually. What I've learned is you really want to pay them the same hourly that they would make behind the chair. So I actually go and calculate what they're making on average hourly, that particular stylist that's filling a different role. And I say, okay, that's what I'm going to pay them per hour. But then it comes to figuring out exactly how much hours they're going to be spending on it. And you should have an expectation of how many hours that they're going to work. And the reason why I do that is because I don't want them to think that one is more important than the other financially. I just want them to like what they're doing either way. And so that they don't feel like they're, trapped in doing one thing or the other thing.
I like that. That's really smart. Great insight. Um, how do you find you talked about, the monthly meetings that you have, where you're talking about, their goals and how much money they are making, how much money they did make. How do you approach actual coaching, right? Coaching correction, let's say, behavioral improvements with the Gen Z specifically, as opposed to older generations.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to be aware that there's definitely a different approach depending on where somebody is at in their career. And of course, that's going to line up a lot generationally. Um, but well, for example, like with some of my older team members, we're a little more casual with the monthly check-ins, and maybe they want to talk a little bit about how much money they're earning, or but sometimes we just kind of check in on like how things are going in their life, right? So it's not always about their career path. When I'm working with my young staff and my new talent, it really, we take that space as like that is for you. That is like actual a benefit for you. And we want to, like I said, show up prepared and be ready to talk about your career and how we can help. So really Gen Z's got me to take that very seriously, that hour or half hour, depending on how much time we need with them every month, really seriously. And they're ready to like get the tips. They want to know what's next. They want to know what's going on for them. And another thing that I would say is around education. They also want education and they're willing to pay for it. We and our company will finance some of their education. We obviously bring in artists from our brands every year, a few times a year. But if they want to go get certified in extensions, for example, or they want to go and take a certain type of curl cut class or the air cut class or whatever, um, they'll pay for it, actually, if we give them a pathway to do that. And so we do that by like financing it on payroll for them. So maybe we'll pay for the class up front and then take that money out of their paycheck for so many days. They really respond to that too. So I think it's about their career path and also their education and how we're supporting them in that way. And I really do feel like that's a benefit of employment, but also a really strong retention strategy for Gen
Yeah.
Z.
Yeah, obviously. And I'm sure that that's extremely appreciated. And the fact that you're giving them the opportunities, showing them the paths that are available is, I think, where a huge value comes in, because when they're off on their own, it's hard for them to kind of know where to go, to know what's available, to see what's out there. And having that proper guidance can really be beneficial for a younger individual really getting their feet wet in our industry.
I like how you're like kind of putting together this idea of how do they approach the commission structure? How do they approach the coaching? Because one of the cool things about this industry now is that stylists can earn money behind a chair in many different scenarios, right? They could work in a commission salon. They could work in a hybrid salon, a rental only salon. They could go rent a suite all by themselves. They can literally do the same clients with the same products down the street, right? And they know all of that. Of course, they know all of that. And for anybody out there, I think that's trying to avoid any of those conversations because they're afraid they're going to spark something in these young stylists or, uh, expose them to something that's going to make them leave you and go rent. Listen, let me just tell you, they already know. They know everything about it. It's all over social media. They follow those people on Instagram and TikTok. Trust me.
Yep.
What you have to focus on is what are you bringing to them? What are you offering to them? What is the culture that you have in your company? And then why should that be something that they might want to consider choosing? But understand, of course, they can go do whatever they want. Focus on you. And don't be afraid to have conversations about, well, here's some of the realities of what it means to rent a suite, right? The landlord doesn't care about whether or not you make more money next year. They just want you to pay the rent, right? And that's very difficult. And you're not going to have monthly coaching, and nobody's going to support your education. And it's okay to brag a little bit about what you get when you're working in a team-based salon.
Yeah. It's really important because, I mean, that's the biggest frustration for individual service providers, is to feel like they're not getting any support, and they're just showing up, doing their clients, and then going home. And they're like, well, you know what? Why don't I just go and do this on my own time, my own schedule, my own space, and I don't have to deal with all the, that goes on around here. And so you have to, as a salon owner or management team, you really have to focus on exactly what you said. Like, what are we providing of value beyond just them showing up and doing clients, right? What can we provide? So everything that you mentioned, from education opportunities, involving them, right, in decision making, in ideas, in sort of management, allows them to feel like they're part of something bigger. And at the end of the day, most people really do appreciate that, right? Feeling like they're part of something is an important human value that we all have. It's a matter of creating that in the right way. So, I want to talk a little bit more about flexibility, because you mentioned that earlier as being a huge desire from the Gen Z population, in our industry at least. So how do you balance the structure needs that you have as a salon owner with the flexibility, uh, desires, and almost expectations that Gen Z has? You mentioned about, time off, like, hey, I should take my birthday off, no problems. Why is that an issue? Working a couple days here, a couple days there. So from time off to, mental health needs, we know that's been a rise the last several years.
Yeah.
Work-life balance in general. How do you balance structure with flexibility?
It's a great question, and I think there's a few different things that you have to pay attention to. Number one, you say structure. So, like, we have a lot of structure. I don't think flexibility is the antithesis of structure in our company. I think we have flexibility within a structure in our company. So, a good example of that would be our shifts. We have a shift from 9 to 2:30 and then from 3 to 9. Right. And so you can work whatever shift you want if there's a chair available there for you. I'm not going to say, okay, you're a new stylist, you have to work on Saturdays or you have to work nights. No. But you can't work in my salon company, for example, from 11 to 7. There's no shift that exists that is that, right? Um, and so it's within a structure, you can kind of choose your own adventure. It's the same thing with the dress code. It's like, yeah, still a structure there because we have conversations about what's appropriate and why it's appropriate.
Yeah.
When it comes to taking days off, I think it's just important to like try to meet them with that, but also have conversations with them that are truthful and see a bigger picture. Don't make it about you, make it about them and their career. So if you're taking too many days off, then it's gonna have an impact on your ability to service your clients on the schedule that they need, right? And so what I found is when I'm really transparent about that and I'm explaining that to them, they'll take that time off, but then they'll be the first to say, but I'd like to work the next Thursday shift if that's available, right? So they're adding to that because I think that whole choose your own adventure piece is something that they love and respond to. And if you have the structure within it, they'll make the right choices for themselves. Another example is with our cancellation policy. So, like, people are talking a lot about that since 2020. What is the cancellation policy? Are you enforcing charges? Are you taking people's credit cards? So, of course, yes, we take credit cards. We take a deposit. It's 25% in our company. And our 24-hour cancellation policy is that, if it's inside that 24 hours, you pay the 25% or you forfeit your deposit or you're paying for your time, however you want to say it. When it came to our staff calling out, we thought that the door should swing both ways. So in our company, if you call out, that client, we're going to offer them to come in that day. If they can come in that day and they can see a different stylist, we're going to try to get them in that day. First of all, it's their favorite day. Second of all, they need the service. Their previous service expired,
Yeah.
and that was the day they were planning on making this happen. If we can't accommodate them that day, then they're going to get 25% off their service when we reschedule them with that stylist that called out. So the door swings both ways.
And that is going to impact financially the stylist who called out that day, obviously.
It is.
If the client comes back in the future is getting 25% off, the staff member is taking a hit on that, correct?
100%. And it's like I would want to pay the 25% if I was canceling within the 24-hour window on my stylist because I'd want them to want to see me the next time. And I
Yeah.
think, vice versa. If I cancel on them and I want them to come back and still believe in me, I want to make that offer. And as I explain that to my staff, they totally are on board and they understand. And that also helps them understand like we have to get that client in that day if we can. People aren't trying to like hold on to their clients in that way. They're trying to serve their clients instead of making it about them.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question about the shifts that you mentioned, and I'm curious. You said you allow a lot of flexibility. You don't dictate, a new peer person has to work on Saturday, for example, and they can kind of choose the shifts that they want. However, as you mentioned, you have 13 uh, stylists working on 6 chairs. So, shifts are kind of pretty booked up. And is there any kind of, pecking order in terms of who gets, first dibs at that picking? How do you manage that with regards to your staff? Because I'm sure there's some shifts that are, very, very popular, but if you only have 6 chairs and 13 stylists, obviously they're not available for everybody, and someone might get left at the end with only certain shifts that are not interesting to them. How do you manage that?
Yeah, it's not a one size fits all, I'll tell you that. So we take a lot of care in looking at each person individually, both with what they want or perhaps what they need to fit for their schedule, because it's not always that. Like some of them have responsibilities outside of work and they need to have a certain schedule. So there's that. But also, when it comes to those popular shifts that you were talking about, like let's take a Saturday. Um, it's a busy day. It's a really good day for a new stylist to grow in our company, and we know that. Surprisingly, so are some other days that maybe are a little unconventional, like a Wednesday. But it's just ever since the pandemic, things are different, right? We just don't know.
Yeah.
But Saturday, for example, I might have to have a conversation with one of the experienced stylists in my salon, and I have actually, who's been holding on to that Saturday, right? And holding on to that shift. And it's not about seniority. It's like, listen, we have coached you to, be able to move your clients to different days. You've been in this industry for 15 years. Like, let's get you off Saturday so that that shift can be available to a young stylist that's looking to grow in the company. So it kind of goes in lots of different ways. And I will say, when it comes to new stylists wanting to take shifts that maybe aren't the best for growing, I'm gonna just have an honest conversation with them and let them know that that's probably going to be the case, and then I'm going to follow up. And like it's okay for them to learn that themselves, almost, and then as long as I'm there to kind of hold that space open for them, follow up and be like, so you still liking that Monday morning shift? You're finding that your friends are coming in on Monday morning to get their hair done, and like, and then giving them that opportunity to learn and pivot. And, I think that they respond to that as well. And I'm always like so transparent. And I think transparency is really key too. In fact, when I'm coaching, I'll say it like, hey, this is me coaching right now. This is what I'm saying as a coach, right? Or, I made this happen. I wanted you to experience this, and I was ready for you to be able to switch if you needed to switch. It's okay for you to try something out. It doesn't have to be because I said so. It can be because you experienced it yourself. And I find that level of transparency also builds quite a bit of trust with them, because they know that like they're in a safe space and somebody's watching, but they're also letting them go off and kind of learn on their own.
Love that. Tim, I appreciate you sharing so much, detail and insight into your inner world, inner workings. We're gonna get into a few more sort of broad-based questions, and I will tap into your overall industry experience, uh, you know, uh, coaching, working with salons. How do you believe that the let's say the two generations, whether it's Gen Z with Gen X, or uh, kind of in that range, right? The older generation and the younger generation. How do you believe that both of those generations can and should be learning from each other?
Ooh, that's a good question. We have an associate program. So a lot of everybody that we hire goes through it, and they're paired up with an educator. They're millennials or Gen X in my company. And so we're kind of setting up that coaching mentee, like stylist to stylist from the get-go.
Yeah.
But I think that my opinion, right, is that the Gen Zs are learning a lot about communication from their older coworkers, from their Gen X or even millennial coworkers at this point, or millennial old, I think as they say now, when they're in their late 30s,
Right.
from them, and getting a lot around communication. Because I think that that's oftentimes a challenge, right? This is a super digital generation. Face-to-face communication is very different. We want them to be able to serve people, 10, 15, 20 years older than them. And so they're learning a lot about that from the older generation. As far as like what those millennials and Gen Xers are learning from Gen Zs, I think they're getting kind of motivated. I've noticed that like the Gen Zs, like I was saying earlier, they seem so hungry and so motivated. It's kind of like what is it, a rising tide raises all boats or whatever. Like they're really having an impact on those Gen X's and millennials who maybe have lost a little bit of the passion and the hunger. And maybe that's because half my staff is Gen Z. I don't know. But I think that there is something that they're bringing to the table. And then, of course, there's just generational conversations around inclusivity, around gender, around race, like all of those things that are kind of hot topics right now. I think they're all learning from each other about how to be a more welcoming space, how to embrace all textures of hair. Like all of that's playing out in my salon all the time. And personally, that's something that I'm really grateful to learn from them because I think it's something that we all need to learn about.
Yeah, very well said and very true. All right, let's close with two pieces of advice. One for the older generation. So, what advice would you give to salon owners or managers who today are struggling to connect with their younger staff and bridging that gap? What advice would you have for them?
Believe me when I tell you, they want this. They really want this. You have to be curious. There is a way for you guys to have a great relationship. They're looking for mentorship. Be a mentor, don't be a manager. I would say that for the older generation.
And how how can I do that in you know quick quick setting? But how can I be a mentor instead of a manager if I'm not used to that sort of mentality and that approach?
I think that like something like a monthly check-in, for example, can be a really great place to establish that kind of rapport, and create a space where you're having these conversations about career where you can be curious. I know it's hard. We're all busy, and if you're behind the chair and you're an owner, your time is even more limited. But I think some sort of commitment to those kind of monthly check-ins, it just sets up a really great place for you to build that rapport. I would start there and in addition to talking to them about how they can improve their career, giving them kind of technical or business building advice, make sure you save a little bit of space for curiosity to find out from them, what it is that's exciting them, what it is that they're looking for. Yeah, exactly, Scott. Listen,
Yeah,
as much as you're going to talk, listen.
yeah. I think that's critical to really relate to them and show them that you are listening, you're looking to understand them, and you're not just trying to, you know, uh, be their parent. Um,
No.
and tell them what's right or wrong. All right, let's flip the script now. What advice would you give to the younger generation, the Gen Z stylist who is entering the industry right for the first time? What advice do you have for them about how to build a lasting career and really thrive in this industry?
I think that I would say that this industry is very analog. Of course, there are digital components to it. I'm a marketing professional in this industry, so of course, I believe that there's a huge part of digital relationship building that happens in your career at some point. But you have to remember that there's like a very much a human face-to-face component to all of this, right? And at the end of the day, you're starting off your career, your job is to learn how to connect with people. And all of those ways that you're excited about that your career are infectious. Take time to build that relationship with your clients, with your coworkers. Understand that you have a lot to learn from the older generations who are so good now at building those relationships because they've been through it all. You have a lot to learn from them. And I think the faster you can pick up the skill set of like building deep relationships with your clients, the more successful you're going to be, not just at retaining clients, but just getting them to recommend their friends, getting them to trust you, to take all of your suggestions, collaborate, have fun, and I think you're going to find that joy in this industry isn't about how many people like your posts on Instagram. Joy is about the way that you share people's life journey with them and how it all plays out behind the chair, face to face.
So well said. Tim, thank you so much for all of your amazing insights, sharing your experiences, your wisdom with us today. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I want to acknowledge you for your years of service to the industry. You've shared with us a little bit about your how you got into it, but you've gone way beyond just managing and influencing, the team in your one salon company by getting involved in such a larger mission with Summit Salon Business Center, being a salon coach, being a speaker, to be able to share important messages and learnings around our industry and how to be successful, both as a salon owner, as a service provider. So thank you for everything that you do. Um, if somebody wants to reach out to you, we might have some, salon owners here saying like, wow, I want to get some more insights. Or there might be some younger generation saying, hey, I want to work for this guy. What's the best way for people to reach out and connect with you?
Yeah, I think the best way is through my Instagram. Please follow me at Tim Fisk is, so TimFiskis, like Tim Fisk is at Instagram. You can also email me if that's your jam, and that's tfisk@summitsalon.com.
Amazing. Well, we'll be sure to include those in the show notes as well for everyone listening and watching. Thank you very much. There you have it, everyone. Whether you're leading a team or just getting started behind the chair, one thing is clear from our discussion today. Understanding each other is the key to building stronger, more connected, relationships, and ultimately a salon culture that's going to allow everyone to thrive. If today's convo gave you something to think about, share it with your team or a fellow salon professional. We have to keep having these important conversations to keep lifting our industry to greater heights. We can all do better together. Thanks for listening, everyone. Share this episode and get out there and have an amazing day.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you so much for listening to the Salon Scoop podcast. This show is produced by Salon S.O.S, a digital marketing agency by industry professionals for industry professionals. If you want simple and affordable solutions for any of your salon marketing needs, such as websites, client loyalty, Google search rankings, social media, or more, come visit us at salonsos.ca or on Instagram at salon.s.o.s. If you want to hear more episodes like this and help us continue to bring the industry great content, it would mean so much to us if you would support us in one of the following ways. Either share this episode with one other industry professional and rate the show on Spotify or write us a quick review on Apple Music. We want to hear your feedback. If you have follow-up questions or ideas for future episodes, please reach out. DM us on Instagram at salonus.s.o.s or hit us up on our website again at salonsos.ca. Again, thanks so much for listening. Now go get your hustle on, keep smiling, and we'll catch you on our next episode.